What's going on, ladies and gents? This is Bento with another Steam controller playtest, and this time I'm going to be trying it out on Psychonauts. I haven't really done much like third-person platforming action games. I've done more third-person like straight shooting games, so I thought Psychonauts would be a cool little game to showcase. Not to mention, since Psychonauts 2 was announced, I'm actually quite excited. But that being said, let's get into what my control scheme is. So for my right trigger, I actually just have it set to melee. The left trigger, I have a dual function. The first soft pull is to lock on or to orient camera, and the hard pull action is to fire your first psychic power. That's usually tied to your right mouse button. So let me just showcase for these guys. Show you guys this. So if I were to soft pull, it'll lock on, and then if I can actually select between them by using the right trackpad, and then hard pull just fires.
Well done, Raz. Keep shooting.
For my left bumper, I have it set to the item menu. The right bumper is set to the power menu. The right trackpad, I have it as my normal camera movement, but there's an issue with Psychonauts where if you have a game, or anytime it detects a gamepad, you can't use mouse movement for whatever reason. So to rectify that, you need to use the right joystick of the gamepad. And so in this case, I have a mouse style joystick input for the right trackpad with trackball motion, just because I'm used to that. And it works very well, actually, despite that issue. I also have motion control on, and it's tied to the right trackpad. I don't really use it this much in game, or I don't really use it as much as I thought I would for Psychonauts, but it's nice. It's a nice little thing to have just in case you want to use it. My left trackpad I don't actually use in game, but for the menus I have it tied to a mouse, and that's just because there are some things in the menus that you can't really access with the right stick. Oh, and speaking of left stick, I have that for movement, and it's just set to WASD. The face buttons I have are Y is to go into first person mode, B is to cancel dialogue or to skip dialogue when you're talking to other NPCs, A is to jump, and X is to interact if you're close to objects or people. I also have the right trackpad click set to jump. I like it that way just because if I want to move the camera while jumping, I can do that instead of having to switch between A and the right trackpad. I do have it on A anyway, just because in case I forget or in case that it feels weird, because I'm so used to having jump as my A button anyway for most third-person games. The left grip, and then before I forget, the left grip is set to my second psychic power, and the right grip is set to my third psychic power. Usually those are tied to Q and E. So with the control set, let's show you guys some actual gameplay. So initial impressions felt really good. I thought platforming was actually one of the best parts about using the Steam controller. Usually I'm fine with using a keyboard and mouse setup to do so, but I'm more leaning towards the joystick setup because I feel like that's a little more comfortable in terms of like platforming, jumping, and all that.
Rasputin, see those valves? That is where the sensors are leaking out. Psy-blast the valves to shut them down and get this area under control.
So if any of you guys are familiar with Psychonauts, this portion of the game is actually really early. I believe it's meant to showcase or teach the player to use your first psychic power in conjunction with more platforming elements. As for combat, I thought it felt really good. No real issues, honestly. I think combat felt really fine using the control stick as well as the right trigger. That's just for the melee combat. Locking on target actually also felt really good. Just having to lock on with the soft pull trigger and then hitting or shooting with the hard pull trigger. I may have mentioned before that it might be a little hard getting used to because it's a little, you have to be a little careful with how much pressure you put onto both triggers, but you can always adjust the sensitivity of when you want the soft pull trigger to fire off. I guess something interesting you could do with the motion controls is that instead of switching targets with your right trackpad while you're aiming, you could always just move your controller wherever you need to aim for, or whenever you're dealing with multiple targets. Not that I really have used it because I'm quite lazy, and frankly using the right trackpad is good enough. Other than not being able to use the mouse for camera movement, the only other problem I've come across is trying to set up a dual trigger function for actual triggers. And what I mean by that is, if you set the back triggers to by default be triggers, setting up dual trigger functions doesn't work for some odd reason. I think because the game registers the trigger as an actual trigger as opposed to having two different functioning triggers. So how I had to rectify that and allow myself to use it was I instead used left and right click for the trigger functions, and then from there on I was able to assign dual functionality for either one. I'm thinking it might be a gamepad issue because I've had a similar problem with Crisis, but for whatever reason, even when I tried it that way, it just didn't work. Actually, now that I think about it, I think this game is the only controller setup where I have one single gamepad function, and that is the right trackpad. Everything else is set to be a keyboard stroke function. I bring this up just because in my Dishonored gameplay, I only have one mouse function, and that's just for the right trackpad, whereas everything else is a regular controller setup. Overall, though, I'm quite pleased with the how the Steam controller has functioned with this game so far. I think Psychonauts is among the games that's really controller friendly, and that's why I think this controller setup actually worked really well for me. So again, just skipping some cutscenes so I can get straight to gameplay, guys. So here's the boss battle. This is pretty much it before the video has to end. If any of you are wondering why his textures are going on the fritz, I think it just might be my hardware being conflicted with the actual game. But just some final gameplay before we finish off here.
Excellent. You've shut down the valve so he cannot be rejuvenated. Now destroy him.
I forgot how annoying this boss battle is. Apologies for sucking, guys.
Watch it.
So we're almost done here, guys, but overall I think the Steam controller works awesome with Psychonauts. Gameplay felt smooth, platforming felt great, and I think if you want to take it for other third-person adventure action games, I think it would work just as well. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all next time.
So, is this where I get a speech and learn another lesson?
No, here's your merit badge. Let us never speak of this again.